Well, welcome to our closing keynote address and our final program for this short but very sweet conference. I want to thank all of you for all of the effort that it takes to come here. Traveling from many places. We have folks from as far away as California, and we have friends from overseas, from Germany, and we are truly grateful for the effort, the expense, the investment, and mostly the timbre and the quality of the conversations that have happened. We have very intentionally built this brief conference around the importance of person-to-person conversation. Which is to say, we really emphasized poster sessions and roundtables in a way as to get people to talk to each other, rather than listen to presentations and have no interactivity. So we hope that was enjoyable to all of you. I want to draw your attention when you receive by email our survey and request for feedback. We very much want to learn from all of our programming, of course, as an ongoing learning organization. So your suggestions, feedback would be most appreciated. I would only insist that you say nothing negative about me. That's very, very important, because otherwise the data will be invalid, and I have no interest in that. I want to thank some important people for making all of this possible. I want a special shout out to my amazing team. Munir is here, Alicia, Christine, Fiona, Hannah, and Neola, an amazing group of talented people. I'm so proud of them, and so much older than all of them. It's really great. I also want to thank each of you that made a presentation of some kind. You sharing with us, giving to us your expertise, your passion, your findings, your experience. All of this is very important. It's very generous of you, and we're grateful to you for that. Our volunteers, we've had volunteers working this conference. Many of you served as peer reviewers, giving us both the person power and the intellectual heft to offer you a really quality experience. I'm grateful for that. Exhibitors, we've had exhibitors all throughout, which is wonderful. I've chatted with all of them. I hope all of you have as well. Sponsors are very important to the financial strength and the ability of our organization to host a gathering like this. So many thanks to sponsors. Sometimes it takes, to quote someone you're familiar with, more than a village to succeed. I want to do a special shout out to two sponsors before I talk about our main sponsor for this event, and that would be Florida International University, FIU. Has been a steady and loyal supporter of all of our program. Many thanks to Leland and his colleagues for making that relationship work, and the University of South Florida. Maybe it's a strange coincidence that the two come from Florida, but that speaks a lot to the academic community in that state and the commitment to the international in both of those institutions. Finally, our sponsor for this keynote is the Peace Corps. I am the younger brother of a Peace Corps volunteer who spent his time in Kenya. I have deep, deep respect for the Peace Corps and the extraordinary work that they have done all over the planet since the early 60s. Our partnership with the Peace Corps and their people is totally natural. It makes so much sense. And one of the important shared missions that we have is to feed each other. In other words, we hope that Fulbrighters of all ages consider joining the Peace Corps, just like we hope that Peace Corps volunteers will consider becoming Fulbrighters. There are many who are both, so that I want to acknowledge, but I'd like to share with you a video from the Peace Corps right now.
Are you looking for more in this world? Then we are looking for you. The big-hearted, the bold, those driven by purpose. We are the Peace Corps, volunteers, partners, communities in more than 60 countries, bringing our experience, joy, and passion to building a better world together. Are you ready to serve boldly, to go the distance to make a difference? Then we have a place where you belong. Join us.
Yeah, a round of applause for the Peace Corps. Many, many thanks. It is my distinct pleasure this afternoon to introduce Jim Clifton, who is our keynote address this afternoon. Jim is the chairman of Gallup, the world's most respected analytics and advisory group. He has anchored this organization for many years. He was their CEO from 1988 to 2002 or 22? 2022, my typo here. That is an extraordinary stretch of time where Jim has been an innovator and a leader, an author, a thinker, someone who has taken the organization from over a long period of time through a period of great social and technological change, the dominance of data in our community, in our world. Gallup has been there again and again. It is inarguable that Jim is the most important figure in this organization since George Gallup himself. It is a great privilege that we have him to join with us and have I know will be a great conversation about who we are, where we're going, how all of this fits together. The way this is going to work is that I'm going to ask Jim to come up in just a second to offer his remarks. Then I'll join him on the stage. We'll sit right here, and what we're going to do is ask you to submit your questions by texting them to this number. So take note of this number. You can text throughout this conversation to this number. My colleague will then send them to me on my phone. This is just a more efficient way to do this, a more inclusive way, so that we don't have somebody dominating the questions and we're a little more democratic about it. Okay? Clear enough? You got that? You've written that down? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a great man and a good guy and a great thinker, Jim Clifton.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you for that introduction, John. It was almost worth coming just for that. It's a little much. You guys, I'm just still kind of rocked. I don't really follow college football. Anybody follow college football? I used to. Yeah, a little bit. My whole family, my sisters, we all went to the University of Nebraska. And my dad taught there for 20 years. I've lived in Washington for 25, but we still have a lot of, Gallup has a 50-acre campus out there and all kinds of stuff. But we used to have really good football teams. I mean, for like 30 years. But we almost beat Ohio State today. I thought I was going to have it came right down to the final drive at Columbus, which would have been a big one. But it reminded me of the old days. There was only two football teams, Nebraska and Oklahoma. Nobody, really, we just beat them all. Between those two teams, we just beat everybody. And we're usually, one of us would be the national champion. We had big showdowns, but there's a story, it's a true story, and it's kind of followed me for a long time. I'm glad I'm old now because young people don't know about it, but it was right before an Oklahoma game, and an ABC interviewer was sitting with a football player. I'm not going to say his name because some of you will have heard of him. He was Hall of Fame and Heisman and everything. And some people always wondered about how smart our football teams were at Oklahoma, and you know the point in Nebraska, you kind of know what I'm saying, but anyway. So why she asked him this, I don't know. She'd ask him about, are you up for the game and blah, blah, blah. He's sitting and he's got a white helmet. Nebraska is just a white helmet with a block N on it, a block red N. And she said, Mike, if the N on your helmet didn't stand for Nebraska, what might it stand for? He thought, he really wanted to hit this one out of the park, and finally he said, I'd have to say knowledge. That's a stupid joke, but it's true. And remember, I went to the same school where most of us aren't sure if you spell it with an N or a K. Our company was founded by this guy, Dr. George Gallup, who was born and raised in Iowa. And he went through undergrad and his master's degree and his PhD there. And something happened where Joe Pulitzer down in St. Louis would go to the train station and he'd see people reading the paper, and he was really trying to make a great paper. It was one of the great papers. And he always noticed that they were reading the funny pages or only the baseball scores. And he's putting all this energy into having the greatest stories, international stories and all that kind of stuff. And it was driving him nuts. But this is what you got to know. So this would have been, Dr. Gallup would be about 120 if he was alive. So it would have been 100, maybe I guess 100 years ago. There wasn't a concept for polling and sampling for public opinion. And so old man Pulitzer said, go and interview every single house. So he was just a student, and he went down. They went around, so he just just went around and did the interview. And what do you read? You read this kind of stuff and all that. He goes back to the University of Iowa, and he goes over to the ag department, and he says to the ag guys, on these great big dirt fields, don't you have a way that you sample them? Don't you have a way you sample dirt? They went, yeah. Well, how do you do it? And he goes, well, we divide it into we put it into quadrants and do all of this kind of stuff. Then you go around, because what we learned is you don't have to sample the dirt in the whole field. You can sample it in all those, and then you get a real accurate answer. That was the moment when Dr. Gallup said, couldn't you do that with people? And they said, I don't see why not. So he goes back down and said to old man Pulitzer, anytime that you need to know something about that or anything about what St. Louis is thinking about, I can tell you. And that's where that started. Next thing that happened was Young and Rubicon called him. He got a column that became real hot, and they said, can you do that for customers? And he said, I suppose. And he says, they said, get on a train right now. We'll double your salary or whatever you're getting there at the University of Iowa. And he moved to New York. Excuse me, he didn't like New York because he's a farm boy, but they had to have him. He was so valuable. So they said, go out to Princeton. That's where our company was founded. It didn't have anything to do with the university, but he said, you can get a farm out there for very little money, and then you get a tractor, and whatever you do in your farm, do that, then take the train in and do this stuff with us. But anyway, he got way into this. This is where I got interested in him. I consider myself, John, a steward of Dr. Gallup's mission. I was so interested in it. He wasn't interested in horse race polling. He had to do horse race polling, then he hit some elections that everybody else missed. And that made him, because he said I had to prove that it was accurate. He was really more like a modern day Aristotle. He was trying to figure out the meaning of life. He was real interested in democracy. He has a quote that we have in all our offices around the world, except in China and Saudi Arabia and whatever else. But if democracy is about the will of the people, somebody ought to go find out what that will is. And he wasn't as much of an entrepreneur. He demanded freedom and independence like an entrepreneur, but he really wasn't trying to make as much money as he possibly could. He was really trying to learn as much as he possibly could. But he also, not unlike Aristotle, also wanted to know what made a great life. And he was into well-being way ahead of his time. And myself and a few of the others thought, boy, if we could be a part of that, that would really be really a different ride. And we acquired it from the family. He had died. We didn't know. I knew Dr. Gallup just a little bit. I was with him 4 times. Actually, kind of 3.5. I'm counting. I drove him to the airport once, and I count that. But we picked up from there, and there had been a question around that maybe we could manage the world better if we knew what the whole world was thinking. We know what the whole world is spending. That institution of economics is a hell of a thing. You're born and somebody writes that down, You get some shots, they write that down. You go to school, they write your grades down, and you spend a bunch of money on your credit card. You know, we keep track of all the transactions of life, but nobody really stops and says, but how's that guy in Kenya feeling? How's he experiencing life? Is he having one of the greatest lives imaginable, or is he having one of the worst lives imaginable? But nobody writes that down. So we went about doing that. And so we got 160 countries. We built consistent sampling frames across those countries. And what was really hard is we had to get all the questions exactly the same so they were comparable. So we did stakeholder interviews with the best academics and argued about scales. If there were researchers in here, arguing about scales is worse than the religion wars. But we wanted to know how man and woman were doing. And he was also, Dr. Gallup was interested in the great American dream. Is there a great American dream? Is that highly individualized? I mean, would there be 300 million different ones? Or do we have about the same one? Could you code them into the same category? And so I'm just going to tell you what, hold on, let's see. Sometimes I get wound up and the time passes too fast, but I was really happy to hear that IMF said this week, something very close to it. They said we got to get real serious. Remember, they were in town, IMF and World Bank. They said we got to get real serious about getting more jobs for people in the world. When we went as deep as we could into this, just to speed it up, if you said, what's the great American dream? The most clear answer we can give is to have a good job. To have a good job with a living wage is the great American dream. It gets a little more complicated. Americans also want to have a lot of hope. They want to have a dream, to have even a better job or to build something. Americans are really good at building things. Even right now, with all the things wrong with us, we're outbuilding the world by a lot. Pound for pound, we punch way above our weight class. But to put it in perspective, so I'm 73 years old at the University of Nebraska. This would have been 1970. The great American dream, I had exactly the great American dream. That was to have a good job, and that's $20,000 a year back then. If you have a salary for $20,000, you're good to go. I'm a man. You find a woman, you have 2 or 3 kids, and you own a home, and you don't have to go to war. That was a great American dream. And I nailed that, by the way. What I didn't include was that having a job that when I did something was meaningful, so it made me feel like my life mattered. That's the difference in a baby boomer to young people. But it's an enormous sociological shift that we haven't fully addressed yet. Because now, kids don't even care if they own a home. You know, getting married, I got this with my kids, but they've all been married now, but people that are alive, they get married 15 years later than my generation did, and they have half as many kids, don't own their homes, and I have kids in the Gallup building down the street here. I go, hey, what'd you do over the weekend? They go, oh, we went to Athens, then we slipped up to Moscow, and when I was their age, you didn't leave the state. You drove your car to Colorado from Lincoln, Nebraska. I mean, that was a big deal, you know. They also are more interested in their development. You know, if I come to work for you, will somebody actually care about my development? But I don't know if I made my point or not, but going from here, Jim Clifton, I don't even know what you're talking about, meaning, mission and purpose. And it's not that I'm soulless and all my friends were soulless. It wasn't a thing. There was, maybe the hippies knew about it, I don't know. But it wasn't a thing. It wasn't a thing with us. Here's where the plot thickens. There's 8 billion people on the planet, and there's 6 billion. I mean, this is close. I like it this way because it's easy to remember. There are 6 billion adults, and with our 160 countries, we get 98% of the population. And when we ask the 6 billion adults what are they'd really like to have a good job. I'm only doing good job, which means you have 30 hours a week with regular work and a paycheck, not necessarily a living wage. 4 billion tell us they want that. This is something, and I've talked to an International Labor Organization about this too. When we ask them, do you have one? In the world, only 2 billion have one. We show unemployment in the world of people that want a job at 50%, 50. I've told the very head of ILO this, with economists and all that. I don't know why they continue to do it. They show the world's unemployment at about 15%. I don't have this in very good order. Right now, when we ask the whole world how they're doing, the answer is not very well. And if you said, why would they not be doing very well? Because half of the jobs are what economists cruelly call informal jobs. I laugh, I don't go nuts, but I was just in London for the whole week last week. I can just see British guys sitting around 100 years ago with gin and tonics going, what do you want to call selling gum and flowers in traffic, or bartering, giving somebody chicken and getting some coal? What kind of job is that? And they go, Graham, I think we'd better call it an informal job. You know, I can tell you something about informal jobs. Those people are more miserable than people that don't have any work at all. Nobody knows that. But, so that means you got, out of 8 billion people, you got 2 billion that are sort of okay. Then the next question we ask is, are you engaged at work? Anybody ever heard of the Q12? We sorted through several hundred questions. There, boom! He wins a ride on the duck bus. Have you seen that thing going around? Apparently not, or you might have chuckled. But we ask questions like, at work I know it's expected of me, at work someone cares about my development, at work someone cares about my well-being. They're pretty soft, but it picks up real fast. People that answer yes to those are generally 6 times more productive. The numbers are astounding. But it means, one of the questions is, at work, the mission and purpose is important to me. So you got all that in there. In the world, of the 2 billion people, only 15% of them have some kind of self-actualization at work. You guys, that's only 300 million. So when you say, so the great American dream has become the great global dream, and you say, how's the whole world doing on that? The answer is there's only 300 million that we've touched. If you said, how would you calm down the whole world? I would say double it and then triple it. But as soon as you could increase it by 1 million, we could. You know, if these guys are talking about colonizing Mars, I think they will. I think we have a lot better chance at this one. I'm not doing this to say rah-rah about the United States of America, but in this country, engaged at work is 35%, more than double. If you go to Europe, England is about 12%. Engaged people at work. France is about 7%. People that are anxious to get there feel like they make a contribution when they go home, feel like they made a difference in something, and hence feel that their life has meaning. Some French people were kind of making fun of it. I took them aside. I didn't say it in front of everybody, but I said, you guys, at some point, they're important French leaders, but I said, at some point, it's not funny. When you have people that get up in the morning and actually want something out of life, and you're missing the barn by that much. I think, John, I'm going to end with this. There's a pretty good measure. I know that there's a lot of really smart people, scientists and researchers and academics in the group. We argued for 3 hours with Danny Kahneman on this. He had a scale. By the way, my smartest guy took me aside after 3 hours. He and I weren't yelling or anything. He's got like 60 IQ points on me. But my guy took me aside and said, Danny's badly beaten you in this argument. And so I went back in and said, okay, we'll take that scale, let's get going. But it's called the Cantrell scale, and we've made it the world measurement. So everybody uses it, but basically all NGOs. It's part of the standard development goals, and hunger, financial literacy, modern slavery, all that kind of a thing. But the question is this: on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being the worst life imaginable and 10 being the best life imaginable, where are you on that scale today? 7 and up is really good. But the next question makes it trickier, which is, where do you expect to be on that same scale in the next 5 years? If you can do 7 and up again, we think that's where you find hope. And hope is a wonderful thing when you're a leader, because when you're bankrupt of hope, that's where people get dangerous, especially young men. But the thriving number for the world of adults, so that's back to your 6 billion number. If you said these are people that are doing pretty darn well, it's 40%. Now there's great variation by country. If you look at the one that was the most dramatic was Egypt, Tunisia, and Bahrain right before the Arab uprising. And they'd been soaring pretty well with thriving, maybe up around 50, and then it goes 40, 35, 30. What we found is if you want to predict big swings in populism, chaos, or revolution, it's actually the crashing of thriving, not the rise of suffering. Remember, Columbia's just fallen apart, right? Are you guys following that one? Thriving was doing pretty well all those years, and then it started, 50, 40, 30, and pretty soon, the place is run now by somebody that it'd be pretty easy to argue he ought to be in prison. It's one of the leaders of not FARC, but the gang, the drug traffickers just like FARC. But what happens is when people give up, that's where they go, I'll just take the change. But see, the question is, give up on what? Give up on me trying to get a job, trying to get a good job. I'm going to stop suddenly, so maybe we can pick something up in questions. But you say, well, what do we do about that? I would say that in all the meetings you're in, you guys, I do the same thing, no matter what country I'm in, or if I'm back out in Nebraska or in New York or here. Every decision that we make, we ought to say, what does this have to do with creating another job or helping somebody that's got tens of thousands of jobs but aren't really creating meaning or purpose in life? But if you said, how do we fix democracy? How do we put this country back on track? It's having people get more meaning out of work. And I think it's very doable. It means a lot to me that you had me over here. I got to watch the Nebraska football game almost win. But thank you very much, and thank you for all you do.
We're going to put that text number back up on the screen for just a second. We've been getting a lot of really great questions, and I'm grateful for them. We're going to start with a couple that I've thought of just as we were chatting, Jim. Those issues of fulfillment and job enrichment. Do you think that this is a source of political division? Do you think that, which is sort of puzzling, because you would think, therefore, that those who are angry and resentful would therefore have perhaps oversampling of jobs that are not providing that kind of happiness? It actually hadn't occurred to me before your conversation that job satisfaction would be a source of deep cultural divide and unhappiness. It makes sense, but I wonder if you could push that a little bit further.
Well, I think what makes it real complicated, John, is it begins with kind of the baseline that I'm out of work.
Yeah.
Or if I have a job, remember, you guys, there's 7.5 million young males between 25 and like 35 that are just at home right now. Remember, that's, as a man, that's when you got to make it, or no woman wants you. And it gets, It gets pretty ugly fast. Remember, they're not in the unemployment number. So few people know that because they're not applying for work. So remember,
Right.
they're not in the universe number that the samples build off of. They're just left out. That's as hopeless as you can get right there. But then, of course, you need something to blame it on. And I don't think that they always know that it's just because they're out of work, but they do blame. But see what they can do, and then so maybe they're living with their mom. Their mom always says the same thing. There are jobs all over. I see them at Arby's and that kind of thing. Those are jobs for 12, 14, depending on what part of the country you live in, 12, 14, 15. And that's when you start to get the hopelessness feeling. And then you say, I don't know what democracy is. I don't know what's going on in this country. Whatever it is, it's not working for me.
And you find, or at least I've observed when I drive through a lot of rural areas, you wonder if that's a more serious matter. You wonder, where is the source of wealth in this community? Where is that coming from? What hope can come out of this little town that I'm driving through? Who employs these people? Where is this happening? Do you see differences, rural versus urban? Are you seeing other demographics that are notable? Maybe they're racial, maybe they're socioeconomic, geographic. Where are you seeing sub-patterns from this?
Well, you know, one thing that all big cities are blue. So when you go to Texas, Austin, Texas is blue. Dallas is blue. Houston is blue. San Antonio is blue. Then sorry, I'm choking, but see, then you get outside the big city and it glows. So if you go to Nebraska, Omaha's blue. And then you get outside of there and it glows red. So then you think those are red states. Those are like, that's why we can't really have a civil war, because like Bill Maher said, but then what if my dry cleaning's on the other side? How do I get to my dry cleaning? But then, so everywhere's like New York. You got New York City, and you know what New Yorkers call the rest of the state? They say they're going out to Alabama, out state there. But so those are two big shifts. But here's what's so important, you guys, is that it doesn't matter if they're blue or red. Some of them are much better led than other ones. So we could use more entrepreneurship or company startups. We're running right now at about 500,000. It'd be better if we were at 7. We're still kicking the whole world's butt economically. A lot of it's debt fueled. But the number this is where mean scores are really not helpful. That number's not very good. But if you go to Austin, Texas, or you go to Nashville, those numbers are absolutely incredible. Somebody's from Sioux City in here. Sioux City's not great. Sioux Falls is exploding. Sioux Falls is one of the best startup towns in America or the world, pound for pound. But it doesn't always make sense. So Nashville will have years where they outproduce even Austin, pound for pound, startups, new jobs, and all that kind of thing. But think about that. Memphis is one of the worst. And Memphis and Nashville are in the same state. So they got the same federal rules, same state rules, and they both even have music backgrounds. Memphis is the blues and Elvis and all that kind of thing. Nashville is that. But they're like, researchers like this, they're like twins separated at birth. And one went up and one went down. But there are rural areas. My wife's a farm girl. We go out there, and there's about 5 guys that get together every morning and just go to work holding a little town called Aurora, Nebraska together, and it's just doing great. You drive up the road 40 miles through corn country, and then you'll have one that's a total meth town, But it's a good example of how much leadership matters.
Yeah. One more question from me, then I'll start tapping into our community here. Gallup did a very interesting studies recently on institutional trust. Those of us who grew up and were affected by Watergate and Vietnam, and a lot of institutional trust was lost thanks to political conflict. It sounds like what you might be suggesting is that institutional trust might be undermined by economic issues, and sort of bread and butter kitchen table questions rather than whether Nixon's in office. What would you say to that? That institutional trust would rise if some of these economic job issues were healthier or more satisfying?
I'm 100% sure you're right, but it would take a little more than that too. What John just brought up is really one of the low points of our country right now. The trust in these institutions is the lowest it's ever been. One that really hurts us more than anybody writes about. Remember, so at Gallup, when we bought the company, we promised we'd never work for Democrats, Republicans, or any special interest groups. So we're sworn by blood that, not really by blood, but that we're always neutral. But I think it's really been unhelpful that journalism has changed so much. Remember, that was supposed to be the watchdog, not just for the three rails of executive and judicial and whatever the other one is. But that watchdog is really important to democracy.
Yeah.
And now the watchdog is less trusted than what the dog watches. So that's a place that we've never been before. You know, again, this all happened in my lifetime. I'm pretty old, but you know, we used to watch Walter Cronkite, and nobody cared if he was crazy left or crazy right, because he had to get every word right. I used to do TV surveys in another life, and you get the general manager of the CBS affiliate in Denver, whatever, he'd be crazy right. News director come in crazy left. Boy, they never argued a bit on every story had to be 100% true with no leaning, or somebody was in trouble. Can you imagine those ethics now? But somewhere along the line, the train kind of jumped the track. But if you could fix one American institution to put everything back on track, I'd get media fixed. I'll make one more comment. They're last. They should be first, and during my lifetime, they were right there with the military. They were so trusted. But to make a whole lot of money on a TV show, it's not just these people are so talented, it's crazy. But it's not just that they can make the news fun, whether you're on MSNBC, Fox, or CNN, or whatever it is. They're the most gifted agitators in the history of our country. And you get way more money if you agitate. And it works. But our citizens have never had anything like that before. And the more it works, the more they agitate. I mean, I don't know what you do with it. The First Amendment's still important to everybody, but I think that has really changed our country.
Well, it used to be that you would watch Uncle Walter and be reassured, and now you watch these other characters, and the stress level is just, it's, you know, it drives you to drink. I'm sorry. A lot of questions from the audience are of an international nature. That would be no surprise among Fulbrighters. I'm going to give you my glasses.
Oh, thank you.
I think you need it more than I do. Some of the questions have to do with comparisons between the United States and other countries. Where would you find the sort of most striking differences in terms of, it might be around job satisfaction, it might be around institutional trust, some contrast where you see the U.S., and you've pointed out some of them already, but where you see the United States way over here and much of the world over there. And I ask that question because a lot of what's happening, and we've heard this anecdotally from many friends around the world, are watching us completely baffled. What are you guys thinking? What are you doing? And I'm wondering if there's something striking about the U.S. as outlier that might shed some light on those differences.
I think that I don't know how many people are in here, a couple hundred or whatever, but I think all of us might have, completely different answers. I don't know if you read any of the crap I write, but the Americans take so much more pride in their work than any other country, and I think that still sets us apart. I'll give you right now there's 1,250 unicorns active in the world. 1,200. So you know what that is? That's the definition of the last round. It's very specific. As soon as it crosses 1 billion. So if we were the city council managing Denver, and you said, what are we really, really going for? We're going for unicorns in this city. We want to make sure we have them in the low-income areas and all. Unicorns fix everything. There's 1,250 of them active. The United States of America has 750 of them. China has about 250. India has about 100. England's doing okay. They have something like 60. Germany's not doing well. That great economic engine's really slowing down. Maybe they have 40 and maybe France has 40. Here's something really interesting. The Middle East has none. It's funny. That's an experiment right there, because they've been saying for at least 30 years, well, we know oil, we got to have businesses, and they try to buy things. They try to move part of Yale University or MIT to Dubai or Abu Dhabi or wherever. But we still take a lot of pride in the fact that we're builders. I mean, you think about it, there's only 300, I'm not doing a promotion for the United States, I'm answering a question. But for us, for the scoreboard to say, with only 330 million Americans, that we have 750, and China with 1.5 billion, and India with 1.5 billion, add them together, and they're only half of us. I think that's one real big difference. I would say something else too. We don't think about it because we live here, but we're a more hostile tribe of people. We're okay with war more than any other country. If you kind of go back over our history, or when we ask questions about what do you think we should do here, Americans are pretty quick to say, let's fight. We weren't going to do it in World War II until, remember, Roosevelt finally said, first of all, he said, I'm not going to send your sons to war. He actually called Dr. Gallup and said, quit doing those polls, because the polls said we didn't want to go to war. Dr. Gallup told him, I never said that you should do what the polls say. I believe in representation. That's what they think. You need to educate them. And that's when he and Winston Churchill came up with that line in Morocco: we're either going to fight them there, or we're going to fight them here. But I think Americans, are definitely too quick to fight. But I think that's another really big difference: building and a sort of hostility.
A lot of people in this room are from higher education, either adjacent to it or working as professors, administrators, and others. In this conversation about happiness and fulfillment and a sense of hope, what would you say might be an appropriate role for higher education in terms of, that might be training, that might be a different approach to work? We have lots of people here in this audience who are from community colleges. They obviously play an important role. Thinking a little bit about going from data to action, is there anything that you can think of higher ed could do or do better?
Well, I've written about this too. Nobody listens to it though, but or reads. But
well, for the next few minutes, we'll listen to it.
We'll see. Kids, you need to draw it out of them, but they dream about building something. Not necessarily a for-profit business, just building something. My wife always wanted to build a children's museum. You see what I mean? But somebody needs to draw it out of them. I had to draw it out of her. So my dad taught school at the University of Nebraska for 20 years. He was really a cool guy, real popular with the students. You ever heard of Clifton Strengths Finder? Some of you heard? He made that, and that's not me, that's him. But we put a lot of dough in and built a school, and it's called Clifton Builders. And now you'll have kids that'll say, I don't believe in making money or whatever. Maybe we all said it when we were really young too, I don't know. But the answer to that is start a nonprofit. Build a great big friggin' nonprofit. You can make a lot of money yourself. I ran a nonprofit. We were paying our guy, I don't know, $800,000 or $900,000. I mean, but it's a big boot. You know, he got his bonuses and all that kind of stuff. I don't mean, I'm going to talk about a nonprofit. But you can build really big things. Or you can go join a company, build a division and all that. But no matter who they are, maybe they want to build a library, maybe they want to build a school in Guatemala. You know, maybe they want to go build something special for the Peace Corps somewhere else. But talk to them about what they can build, and you'll be surprised the answers you got back. Kids I mentor only low income and mostly African Americans and mostly only men. I understand men better than women, and I say that. I got 3 daughters and a wife and everything. I've been married to her for 40 years, still don't quite understand. I'm going to put that back in my mouth. But a really good question, the other one I would say, what can you build? If you said to them, what's the best life imaginable? If we ask every student, what's the best life imaginable? I do that with kids, and you write it down, and hell, you can do it. You know, if you go to work on it, a kid writes down that he wants to make, he's real young, but he wants to make $120,000. I mean, by the way, that's a threshold. You hit there and you're different. And we went to work on it, and hell, he hit it really fast. But I think you got to get their imaginations into the game. I'll make one other remark. This thing that Don Clifton made, he figured out that when you work with weaknesses, they never turn into strengths. And he bet his career on it. But if you can figure out somebody's strengths, they develop infinitely throughout your whole life, and they actually grow, I mean, in an unlimited way. He said, but we tend to be remedial, and so we figure out what's wrong with John, then we all sit him down and he works on that, and you crush him. He knows that when he comes to meet with us, that you know what we're experts on? We're experts on what's wrong with him. But what if we went to work and figured out what was right with him? Then when he came in, but anyway, there's an assessment that it's called Clifton Strengths, and he always said he's been dead for 25 years or something. But he always said it's the only test you'll ever take in your life where every answer you give is exactly the right answer because you're telling us who you are, and then it prints out. But he wrote a taxonomy of the 34 thought patterns and life themes somebody might have. But so there's 4 million kids who graduate from high school each year. 2 million of them go into a JUCO or don't go, and the other 2 million go into a 4-year. Of the 2 million that go into a 4-year, last fall, 600,000 of them took a test about what's right with them, which is pretty amazing, because if you can get 600,000, you can get all 2 million of them. Then you could only have to wait 10 years and you'd have a strengths-based nation. And that would not only change America, that would shock America. But at the University of Tennessee, you come in, you take that, and then the president of the university, his name is Dondi Plowman. She's a genius. And then she assigns you a board of directors, 2 upperclassmen. Remember, if I'm an upperclassman, you know, I'm way above you. And,
right.
And then 2 adults. And then you have 5 board meetings a year. But those are 3 things. Clinically determine what's right with them, ask them what the best life imaginable is, and talk to them about, do you secretly dream of building something? I think all of those. You don't even need any more questions. Just work on those.
Your answer weighs heavily with me because at this point in my life, with my sons old enough, I worry about this next generation. I worry that they've concluded that we've done such a rotten job of managing our polity and our environment that, you know, they've checked out on us and they're angry and losing hope, and that is devastating to you and me, right? Because we all of us who are old enough are handing this off to someone else, and I appreciate the insights on that. Another set of questions are around gender divides, which is, and you've mentioned some of this just now. Where are you seeing important, maybe concerning differences between, especially young men and young women, in terms of their attitudes, their feelings moving forward? We see demographically, for example, that young men are applying to and staying in college at lower levels than ever. Meanwhile, women are taking those seats and excited about that. So there's a gender divide that's worrisome there, but other gender differences that you're seeing of note.
Well, yeah, that's, I mean, all these schools have more women in them, I mean, which that's been a short period of time, I think. So there's something called the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, and it represents 47 historically black colleges. There's 300,000 kids in it. I was chairman of it for 15 years. But we really had trouble. It'd be an all women's historically black colleges would be all women if we didn't force it. But it's happening in kind of out in the square states with white males. But it's almost like males are cycling out. But I do think there's some kind of a rescue. I mean, it's great that, women are taking over. God, I was in London, I said this week, a group of people came into our boardroom. They were just going to give a report and all that. And it was all women and one guy.
Yeah.
And they're young, like you're talking about. But yeah, when you call the young people in your organization in, you have a bunch of women, not men. And that's unbelievably different over my lifetime. The thing, John, that is that women are veering much more liberal, and men are veering conservative. And so there's a really clear divide. It's not fuzzy or anything, but men and women are dividing as far as political views.
A last question, I think, having to do with where we are right now. I know everyone in this audience, I think, are thinking about what will happen on Election Day, and I'm not asking for predictions at all, as much as some thoughts as best you can of where we are right now. As a people, as a polity, there's so much anxiety out there, and my question is, why? What were some of the roots of that divide, of those anxieties? And as an observer, as a thinker, as an actor in this space, do you have any thoughts about how we could mitigate that and approach the world with a little more hope? As I look back over the best times in America, the best time in the history of humankind was between 1850 and 1950. And Americans, we just exploded. There's more human development in that 100 years. We invented stuff, cars and flight and transistors and plumbing and it exploded. And the whole world followed, and we were in a great leadership position and all those sorts of things. But you say, what separated that great time is that we became a real economic engine. Everybody had jobs, pay kept increasing. Remember, we don't have that now. So you got about half the population that hadn't had a pay increase outside of inflation for 20 years, you see. But boy, you could feel that energy. But when that economic engine in America, when that thing starts running on empty, we really go sour. But if you said what would pick all this back up again, remember, 60% of Americans on Friday, or whenever the end of the month is, are a little bit short.
Just recently, that was 50. Going from 50 to 60 is really a lot. And so we're out of money. And remember, when you haven't been getting a pay increase for that long because of inflation, and then you have inflation when your hamburger costs 50% more, that's a decrease in your paycheck.
Right.
And isn't it hard to keep up with this stuff, you guys? I mean, it's impossible. But all you know is that I'm getting screwed. But I watch, Jerome and IMF and all that, and they're saying that America's economy's doing so well. But then I kind of stop and I go, yeah, but don't we have debt of 120? But so much of it's debt fueled. But this, I'm going to kind of come all the way around. But what I really know is when it's not working for me. America needs its next big run on something because, and again, somebody's got to lead the world. You don't co-lead the world or anything like that. And I mean it in a good way, in that we want to be helpful and important and all that. But we need a big run on something that's not just technology. I love technology. Gallup's got all kinds of it. Generative AI is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Did you know right now there's 50 generative AI companies that'll sort down to which ones, just kind of get it all, like the big 7 and that. 40 of them are American, and the other 10, only one of them is Chinese. We're just going to own the world on that.
Yeah.
The projections they just made with technology that are public, in 25 years, 90% of it will be owned by Americans. Great. But the problem is it doesn't really help much with jobs. And so generative AI is going to skin out a lot more of them. But we need something real big, kind of like when we went from agriculture to industrial. And I guess I'm too old, I won't see this. I think there's going to be an unbelievable move to green energy. And I think there will be wind that kind of works. I think solar is pretty good. But if we get that thing, everybody's been hoping for, where you go from thermonuclear fission to thermonuclear fusion,
Right.
Everything changes. That's like where your air conditioner is. You have a nuke plant right next to it, and it's not dangerous. And you don't have to put dangerous stuff in a hole and all of that. But that means that we would go through really good paying labor jobs. America could lead the whole world on the invention of this stuff. And there was a conference. Right now, the whole world's, I think I'll get this over with. Right now, the whole world's GDP is 100 trillion. I love that number, it's easy to remember. If it grows at 3.5 for one generation, which is 25, that's 200 trillion. It's not quite enough, but if you said who's going to rule the world, America's got to get its 25% of that 100 trillion. They estimate over the next 40 years that the green revolution would be 170 trillion. The amount of, and remember, the whole world needs to be rewired with thermonuclear fusion. But I'm probably the only guy, I'm more bullish on the future of this country than I've ever been.
I want to thank you, Jim, for one of the most extraordinary hours I've had in a long time, chatting with you and thinking about this. I would offer a couple thoughts for my friends in the audience. One is, it's very important to be thoughtful, not somber. There's a difference between those two things. You can think about these things in serious ways without being depressed at the end of it, because understanding is the starting point for action. And therefore, what are we working on? If we work on things that are not actually a problem, or things that should get more of our attention, we're wasting our time and our energies. And being thoughtful and data-driven about it is so important. I'm just grateful to all of you. I want to thank all of you for attending and wish you safe travels home. In the meantime, please thank Jim Clifton for a great afternoon. Thank you, my friend. Thank you.